Hello, this is Frank Caprio, unabashed conservative and defender of our founding principles. I've taken the time, read the books, studied the material to understand our founding. I understand the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. I understand why this country was founded and what principles it was founded upon. More importantly, I see how we're diverging from that path and how it's destroying our country. Today I'm going to talk about a myriad of topics, the first being, what is a conservative? There are so many people out there who identify as conservative and they're not. A real conservative, it's pretty simple. A real conservative understands the founding principles of this country, unalienable rights, understanding that life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property are all unalienable rights. They don't come from government, they don't come from other men, they definitely don't come from a piece of paper. They're a part of us, and the reason that we have government is definitely not to infringe on them, but to protect them. They understand what a limited government is. Our governments at the state level are set up by Constitution, and the federal government is set up by our U.S. Constitution. The federal government was set up in a specific way with specific delegated and enumerated powers that it was given. Most so-called conservatives today do not identify that our government is out of control. Only the real ones do. They understand the idea of the consent of the governed. Not only that the government is made up of we the people, but the only true powers, the only rightful powers that our government can have are those that are already possessed by the people. They understand that the government's only job, and I just mentioned this, but it's very important, the reason that we create government is to protect our rights. There's no other reason for government. We have a military to protect our borders. We have a court system here. The government should not be involved in Americans' lives until somebody's rights are violated. That's when the government should be invoked. We shouldn't have government as part of our everyday lives. Then there are those so-called conservatives who say they're conservative but really aren't. They are easy to identify. If they support a bigger government, they support more debt, they ignore our Constitution in most of their actions by infringing on our rights or supporting unconstitutional military actions across the globe, you know they're not real conservatives. I just read that there's an agency of the government that puts out news stories to support the government ideology and the government line. Basically, fake news by our government to influence the American public. And actually, it even gets worse than that. And part of the story that I read said that the government, other agencies of the government are taking action because of these stories. So the government creates a story about somebody or some group, and then other agencies act upon the news that was created by its own federal government to take action against Americans. This is not supported by the Constitution. This is also nothing new. I remember reading about Woodrow Wilson wanting to get into World War I, so he had some people in government, I don't know if it was part of the military or part of I don't know if the FBI was around them, but I think they were, to start putting out propaganda against the Germans to get the American public fired up so they would want to enter World War I. This is a symptom of a government who is out of control. These actions are also not supported by the Constitution. So a real conservative upholds the Constitution. They understand its timeless nature. They understand that it created our federal government so it could do certain things that the states individually cannot do effectively. The problem is that we don't have many real conservatives in government. There's lots that identify as conservatives, as I said, but not many real conservatives. And this is the problem. All take an oath to the Constitution of the United States, but almost none of them honor that oath. This must change. Our founding principles are important. The reason that we have been the most prosperous and free nation to ever grace the face of this earth is because of our ideas, our conservative ideas, unalienable rights, consent to the governed, limited constitutional government, the idea that government is formed to protect our rights. That is what made us the greatest country in the world. And as we move away from those principles, we see the results. Which leads me to my next topic, the failure of the two-party system. Today we see Democrats embracing socialism. They are all for the redistribution of wealth, for the growth of government, for infringing on people's rights in the name of safety. The problem that we see with the two-party system is the Republicans have moved left with them. They no longer represent the ideas of limited government, fiscal responsibility, or do they support the Constitution? This is easily proven throughout our history. Starting over 100 years ago, it was Republicans and Democrats responsible for things such as the Federal Reserve, the IRS, a graduated tax system, the CIA, the FBI, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. The list is exhaustive. The best analogy for what we see today is to compare the Republicans and Democrats to Coke and Pepsi. Coke and Pepsi are competitors, but they're ones that work out deals with their competitors to make sure that they keep the market share. And that's exactly what we see with Republicans and Democrats. They supposedly differ on many subjects, but they both lead us down the same path ultimately. Democrats at a faster pace, Republicans at a slower one. No matter which party is in power, we continue to get the same things. A bigger government, which creates a bigger debt. A government that continues to allow illegal aliens to invade our country while luring them here with incentives. A government that continues to pass laws which slowly chip away at our unalienable rights. A government that forces us to buy health care and punishes us for not doing it. Any of the following sound familiar? Abolition of private property rights, accomplished through asset seizure, unjust application of eminent domain, and property tax seizures. A graduated tax system, everybody knows about the IRS. Abolition of rights of inheritance, I think everyone knows about the inheritance tax that we have here in the United States. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state. Most people have heard about the Federal Reserve. Control of transportation and communications in the hands of the state. Government departments like the FCC, the Department of Transportation, the Interstate Commerce Commission. Government schools. The idea that the federal government would have any control over schools will be repugnant to our founders, and that's exactly what we see today. What do all of these ideas have in common? They are all planks from the Communist Manifesto. They are also not authorized by our Constitution. All of these un-American ideas are part of our nation because of Republicans and Democrats. Which leads me to my next topic. If we insist on having parties, what we need is a third, fourth, and even fifth party. We need to break up the duopoly that we have nowadays. If we did, we could get true representation, that people can support a party that actually supports their ideals. I was a lifelong Republican. I had the good fortune that when I was in school, I had some teachers who really taught me about the founding principles of this country and about its history. I was real lucky in that. Nowadays, kids don't even have that chance. But my first vote was for Reagan in 1984. And I started getting involved in politics, started doing a lot of reading, and it took a little while. There were a lot of reasons why I hung out with the Republican Party as long as I did. But I finally realized that they no longer represented me. Just like Reagan, I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. I support the Constitution. I support the rule of law. I support the conservative stance. And Republicans no longer did that, so I could no longer in good conscience continue to be a Republican. I'm now part of the Constitution Party. It's a small party, but it is principled, and we are getting larger. There are other good third parties out there. I would urge people to look at the Constitution Party for sure, but libertarians are also a good group to get behind. I have a lot of libertarian friends. We have a few differences on some things, but overall, if we had more libertarians elected, or if we had more people from the Constitution Party elected, we would see some great changes coming to these United States. But the idea of having more parties would lead to coalition building, where if you just didn't have either or Republicans or Democrats in power, they had to rely on a third or a fourth party to build coalitions. That would mean government would move slower, and the people would again have more control over what their government does. We could even introduce the rule of law back into government. That would be a nice idea. The founders, when you read about them, they were against the idea of parties, though almost instantly there were parties that were formed. Within a decade, they had recognized factions that were battling against each other. But there is nothing in the Constitution which talks about a two-party system. That's just a manifestation of where we've come from, but it's time for it to end. There's definite proof that the two-party system has been destructive to the United States of America, and it has to be broken up. Our country has moved off the trajectory of liberty and prosperity and instead has moved into the era of bigger and more intrusive government. It's up to we the people. We can change it, but we just have to get educated, and we have to start electing people that will do the right things. Right now, it's just a big machine of Democrats and Republicans just churning out candidates that follow the party line, and that has to end. It must end for us to remain a country. Some people think that we're eternal. They have no idea in history. Countries have come and gone. Rome fell for a lot of the same things, for a lot of the same reasons that we're seeing today, for activities that we're seeing in our government. Bigger intrusive government, more debts, lots of foreign wars. It's just a symptom of government. It is nothing unique to the United States. Throughout history, governments have been the biggest infringer on human rights ever known. We talk about Antifa or white supremacists. That's just minor players. Those are distractions. Our real enemy is our federal government, and there's no other way to put that. They are consistently moving in the direction to limit our rights, to take more money out of our pocket, to make us subjects, not citizens. And it's time for that to end. For that to end, we have to get Democrats and Republicans out of power, which means we must support third parties, or fourth parties, or fifth parties. We must make the idea of principle over party a part of our lexicon again. Without doing that, if we continue down the road that we're going down, it is inevitable. It may not happen in the next 10 years. It may take longer. Who knows how long it's going to take, but our country is going to fail. It is going to be crushed under its own weight if we continue down the path that we are going right now. So what do I consider the existing problems in the United States that are constantly not being addressed? First of all, it's immigration. That's both illegal and legal. Illegal immigration is really becoming a topic. I do like Trump and his rhetoric on this. There is no right to come to our country. We're a sovereign nation. We can control our borders. In the early parts, early times in our history, we didn't have to worry about that. There was no incentives to come here. The people who came here contributed and built this country. Nowadays, we see people coming here to live off the prosperity that we have created. They're not here to move us forward. They're just here to reap the benefits of what we have created. Bottom line, granting citizenship and allowing people to immigrate to our country is a tool that is supposed to be used to improve America and help Americans. It has long past stopped serving that purpose, so it really must be re-examined. What I see as another divergence from our original founding principles is our unlawful use of the military across the globe, including the 600 plus unconstitutional bases that we have built in foreign countries. Congress invoking laws such as the AUMF, or Authorization to Use Military Force, or the War Powers Act are blatantly unconstitutional. Congress, and only Congress, was given the power to declare war. They cannot change that. They cannot modify that. That is the power that they were given. For them to use the AUMF or the War Powers Act legally would mean that they would have to change the Constitution, which would entail an Article 5 convention where the states would actually have to ratify an amendment to the Constitution to give the Congress that power to make laws in that area. I am a veteran. I am the son of a veteran who served in World War II and who put 27 years into the Navy. I respect and support our troops, and I say that they should all be brought home, that we hold Congress to the law and make them declare a war before we use our military forces. I say let's honor the troops and let's honor the Constitution and bring our military home. To continue to put troops in harm's way in defiance of our Constitution is both immoral and unlawful. President Eisenhower warned us about this on January 17, 1961. In his farewell speech, he warned us of the military-industrial complex. He was very direct in his discussion on this topic. He warned that a large armament industry could lead us to abandon our, quote, peaceful methods and goals. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizen can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals so that security and liberty can prosper together. That was the end of his speech. Very powerful stuff coming from a president who was also Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Western Europe during World War II. It's time that we heed his words. It is time that we bring our troops home and stop putting them in harm's way to support a foreign country's agenda or to make people rich. As more troops continue to be sent home in body bags, remember that it could have been avoided. That son or daughter, mother or father would be alive today if we abided by the law. Capitulating to the whims of the war hawks or those who would profit from our unlawful activities is no longer an option. If you truly support the military, then do the right thing. Support bringing our troops home. The unlawful and immoral actions of those who break their oaths to office to put these true Americans in harm's way must be stopped. Support the Constitution and the young men and women who swear to protect it. Bring them home. That's my stance, and I'm not going to budge an inch on it. Another problem we are confronted with daily is an out-of-control government breaking the law on a daily basis and in the process putting us into a crippling debt. We as a nation are way past bankrupt, and that's not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem is we continue down this path, adding more debt every minute that we exist as a nation. The problems we face from our federal government are not restricted to the United States, nor is it anything new in history. History shows us that governments are the largest abusers of human rights ever to exist. What is peculiar in our situation is that we have the law on our side. We, the people, must insist that our government follow the law, or we're going to doom ourselves and our posterity to have to fight once again to realize the liberties that our forefathers gave us. A little side note on the debt. Without the existence of the Federal Reserve, our government cannot be doing what it's doing today. Let's remember, the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. It is neither federal nor is it a reserve. Our government runs up a debt when they pass these huge budgets, and then the Federal Reserve loans the money to the government to pay for these things. The Federal Reserve was originally created to stabilize our currency, but since its inception in 1913, the value of our currency has dropped almost 90%. Any prosperity that we see today is but a shadow of what it could be if we had true currency in our country. Like many entities created by our federal government, the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. The power to coin money and determine the value thereof was a power given to Congress, which they, again, simply cannot pass on to another body. The Congress was given this power, which doesn't mean they have to actually physically coin the money or make the bills, but they do have to be in charge of the process. They have to be accountable. There's a great video on YouTube with Alan Greenspan being interviewed on 60 Minutes where he states that the Federal Reserve is independent of the federal government. Take a look at the video. It is very enlightening. The idea that a private corporation controls the monetary policy of the United States of America is repulsive. It is also not supported by the Constitution. Ron Paul had it right. Audit the Fed, then get rid of it. And I think he was asked, what do you do when the Federal Reserve disappears? His answer, well, what do you do when you cut a cancerous tumor out of a body? Both are the same. There are plenty of videos and explanations about the evils of the Federal Reserve. I urge you to get educated on the subject. It is of utmost importance. And lastly, one of our biggest problems as a nation is our educational system. The Annenberg Public Policy Center recently did a survey, and the results were astounding. Of Americans asked, only 26% of the people could name the 3 branches of government. 33% didn't even know any of the branches of government. Add to that another survey which stated that only 2% of Americans could name all 5 rights protected by the First Amendment. This is a planned attack on our republic. Make no mistake about it. This is a long-term strategy to destroy our country from within. We have many youth and also adults who have no idea about the founding principles of this country. They know nothing about the Constitution. This is the root of all of our problems. Our country is dying because people are ignorant and apathetic. We have many people nowadays who are openly pushing for socialism. Socialism is a disease. It is documented to be the enemy to liberty and prosperity. Wherever it is tried, it fails. Most people don't know the history of early America. Jamestown and Plymouth Colony are both testaments to the capitalistic free enterprise system. Both almost failed because of their embrace of socialist policies, but thankfully both renounced their socialist policies and were able to survive. Look to Venezuela, where socialism has taken reign. They're eating zoo animals. People are starving. It is a horrible place to live, and it used to be a very prosperous country. That's what socialism brings. The idea of socialism is completely opposite of our founding principles. Socialists do not believe in unalienable rights. They believe in the power of government. They believe that government is there to rule the people in what they see as their best interests. Our country was founded on the principle that we, the people, are able to rule ourselves, that we elect and appoint people to carry out the laws, and that we do have unalienable rights that governments are there to protect. It is time once again that we recognize this truth and push forth the American agenda. Education is the key, and I want to help. Visit me at Constitutional Cappuccino, the wake-up call to the Constitution and the ideals it espouses. It can be found at www.constitutionalcappuccino.com. I have over 50 articles that I've published, many dealing with what I talked about today, about education about the Constitution and our founding principles, and specific ideas, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the 10th Amendment, to where you can be educated on the stuff that's important and stop listening to the media and the drivel that they're pushing. I'm currently in the process of upgrading my website to include more of the articles that I have written, most dealing with exactly what I was talking about today, our founding principles and specifics about our Constitution. I also have an ever-growing number of podcasts which I will include. Also available on the website is my book, Patriot Ammo, The Words Behind Our Flag. It is a civics book which teaches our founding principles and our Constitution. It lays the foundation of why we created our country and how we did so. And then it gets into the Constitution, article by article, explaining exactly what is meant there. It also goes into some of the attacks on the Constitution, like the Commerce Clause, the Necessary and Proper Clause, the General Welfare Clause, the Supremacy Clause. It talks about the attacks that we see on our Constitution and why they are wrong. I urge you to get educated because, in my opinion, only an informed populace will be able to fight off the forces of tyranny and oppression and once again put us back onto the path of liberty and prosperity. With that, I will leave you with a quote from George Washington in his 8th annual message on December 7th, 1796. The common education of our youth well deserves attention, and a primary object should be the education of our youth in the science of government. In a republic, what species of knowledge can be equally important, and what duty more pressing than to patronize a plan for communicating it to those who are to be the future guardians of the liberties of this country? Thank you for listening.